This is In Touch with Terri, brought to you by Terri Ross Consulting, expert management consulting and sales training to help your aesthetic practice thrive.
If we go to your listener base and my listener base, I think many of them would first define themselves as a plastic surgeon, a dermatologist, a cosmetic physician. Next, they might say, well, I'm also a practice owner. But the third piece that is really universal is that they are leaders, and leaders by definition have positional power. They can hire and fire. They have personal power, and they have presence. And all of that influence needs to be brought to bear to give people what they need, subordinates what they need in these challenging times.
Hey, Terri's Tribe. Thanks for coming back for another episode of In Touch with Terri. This is a podcast for medical spa professionals who are looking to develop systems and processes that will attract more clients, convert more patients into paying procedures, and ultimately generate more revenue. This is episode 19, and I'm Tim Cicerelli with Inbound Digital Media, the content creators for Terri Ross Consulting. Today, Terri Ross is joined by Dr. Mark Tager, the Chief Enhancement Officer of Changewell, Inc. Dr. Tager will be sharing a very valuable message for those who are currently leading an aesthetic or health-related business of any size. Some of the questions he'll be answering are, what can you do to best support the mental energy and physical well-being of your staff? What can you do to keep your own energy, outlook, and behavior positive and productive? And finally, how do you create a future when you just can't see what's ahead?
Hello, Tribe. It's Terri Ross, and I am here today recording episode 19 with a very, very special guest and industry leader in the community. We have with us today Dr. Mark Tager, who is the Chief Enhancement Officer of Changewell, Inc. and Changewell.com, which is a San Diego organization that trains and coaches professionals to enhance their presence in person, on camera, and online. Who the hell doesn't need that? Dr. Tager is a veteran of more than 1,000 presentations, and Mark shares his skills and passion to empower those who attend his training. So, we are in this mess still, right, with COVID. And Dr. Tager has written many, many, many books. He's going to be doing a webinar next week on the 22nd, which is what we're going to be focusing on for this podcast. So I would encourage you to listen intently. We're going to be talking about stressful times. And I want to welcome Dr. Tager. Thank you, honey, so much for being here with us.
My pleasure, Terri. Great to be with you as well.
So Dr. Tager, right, you're a physician who's widely known in the integrative and aesthetic healthcare fields. You're also a businessman and an entrepreneur, helping build some of the most major aesthetic device companies. You're also one of healthcare's most popular speakers, in demand and on global stages. So today you're here to talk about leaderships in times of stress and change. And it turns out that these are not just random thoughts. You wrote a book about it. Tell us what the thesis of the book is.
Thanks, Terri. The first third of my career was actually spent in organizational development and human resource training. And I've always been fascinated by the interplay of leadership, stress, and performance, how we can get the best from ourselves and our people. And 2002, we had the first SARS epidemic. And what we found then was a situation very close to what we see today, in which people were uncertain and hesitant, and there were layoffs, and the economy was in shambles, and leaders needed to rise to the occasion. So it turns out that the skills that are necessary in leadership, and when things are stable, they're one set of skills you can control, you can command. But in ever-changing times, leaders need to flex their leadership abilities to give people and to provide for themselves that which will move the organization forward.
Mark, that is really impressive. And obviously, I've been a sales director. I've been a VP. Leadership has been something I have equally studied. And I am fortunate to have known you for many years. We again, speak on the same circuit because you're running these practice management tracks. And I would say that there's no better time to kind of revisit your book and to focus upon these skills, because everybody right now, whether their practices have been shut down or they're coming back and they've lost staff, I have been getting so many questions about how do I be a better leader? How can I manage my people and how can I support them? So you wrote the book 18 years ago. How were these ideas created and how have you used them?
Some of the work that I did early on in my career was looking at stress-related workers' compensation cases filed in the state of California. And years ago, there were about 6,000 a year. And you look at these cases and you say to yourself, are we just not making tough enough people? Or is there something about the leader-subordinate, manager-subordinate relationship that could make people ill or conversely keep them well? So for years, I did a training program. And when I went around and I asked people to do two things, to think of the worst boss they've ever had and how did his or her behaviors affect their energy, enthusiasm, competence, or confidence. And then I asked, think about the best boss you've ever had. How did his or her behaviors affect your energy, your enthusiasm, your competence, and your confidence? And if you take out and bookend those answers, they tell you so much about the power of great leadership, about the power to affirm, the power to make people feel valuable. And if we go to your listener base and my listener base, I think many of them would first define themselves as a plastic surgeon, a dermatologist, a cosmetic physician. Next, they might say, well, I'm also a practice owner. But the third piece that is really universal is that they are leaders. And leaders, by definition, have positional power. They can hire and fire. They have personal power, and they have presence. And all of that influence needs to be brought to bear to give people what they need, subordinates what they need in these challenging times. And by the way, if you lead well, you sleep a little bit better at night too.
I love the questions, what is the worst boss you've ever had and what is the best? I love what you said too about if you've asked somebody, what do? They will typically say, right, I'm a plastic surgeon, I'm a derm. And I've used this analogy and I say this, the tail stinks at the head. And what I often find too is when I'm coaching clients, I'll tell them to even do these little Monday morning huddles. And they're like, well, why the hell why would I do that? So I love that we're talking about this topic right now. And certainly it's no coincidence with these unprecedented times of stress and change. So I'd love if you could give us more of an example of a situation where either you've used these, what was wrong and how did you apply them, or what you have found and what you would give or tell practices that they should do or could do better.
There are some traits that are very, very important in changing times when you don't have all the answers. So one of them is flexibility. Each one of us as a leader has a style. Now, where did you get your leadership style? You got it from attitudes, behaviors, early childhood experiences. You got it from the kind of mentors you've had. You've got it from training programs you've gone to. So you have a set leadership style. And in stable times, maybe that's working for you. You and I have both been in practices where we see leadership styles that aren't working so well, even in stable times. The issue there is in changing times, you need to be more flexible. Now, what that often means is that you need to tailor your messages to resonate better with different types of people. This is a time where all of us need empathy. Empathy, by the way, is not sympathy. It is not trying to feel as another person feels, because that's very, very difficult to do. But it is just the recognition that feelings are involved and that you understand those feelings. So this is an important time now for leaders to listen more, to be more empathetic. We have one of the chapters in the book is LEAP. It's a formula. Listen, empathize, ask, and propose. I think very often leaders jump right to listen, shut it off, and present.
Mark, say that again, because I love it. I love that you just said leap, because I teach layer, right? My layer is listen, acknowledge, explore, and respond. And I mean, you just hit the nail on the head. Whether we're talking about change in stressful times in leadership, and or we're talking about seeing clients in the practice and how they can communicate better and really understanding someone's personality traits, right? I'm a driver. So somebody that's an amiable, I might think they're sweet, but they're probably going to annoy me, right? So we look at the Myers-Briggs, and people should do that. So can you just repeat what LEAP
Yeah,
stands?
I want to take that just a step further in terms of what you said, that each of us has a temperament. We've acquired preferences, a combination of early childhood upbringing and in heredity that have fused around the age of 3, 4, 5 years old. So if you are a parent and you look at your kid at age 3, 4, 5, you kind of know what you got. And you know the difference there if you've got two kids, as I do. And what stresses one doesn't stress the other so much. The way I have to communicate with one is a very, very different way for how I communicate with the other. One of them is harder for me to get along with. It's not as natural. It's not as easy. Same with the other child, may be more easy. So if you have employees, there are those that you naturally resonate with. Now, I am, in my system, I call myself a high logic person. That's how I interpret events, logically, analytically. However, someone who is a high relationship, or your term amiable, they need their feelings acknowledged. Their concern is for other people. And it can be very difficult for me to really deliver empathy because it's not natural. My wife has been trying to teach me to do empathy for 35 years. And I think I get maybe a B minus now. I started out as an F plus, and I'm a B minus. And it's interesting because highly logical people who deliver empathy do it differently from highly amiable or relationship-oriented people. So it comes naturally to some people. They naturally put others' needs ahead of their own. They naturally go to that feeling state. They know how a decision will affect others. And for a high logic person, it's a process. It's let me see if I can understand how you're feeling right now. And then they kind of guess. So if I'm in a situation where someone is feeling, I think they're feeling sad. And I say, well, you're really sad about this. Now, the good thing is that you get points for acknowledging a feeling. And if you're right, they say, yeah, I was sad. But if you're wrong, here's how that works. Well, I wasn't exactly sad. I was upset. Great, you're upset. So that's the acknowledge part of Terri's system. So you listen, and you acknowledge and ask and propose. But this is hard, particularly for, if you're a surgeon, you are used to getting things immediately. I want it done stat. I want it done right now. You're used to being in those situations in which you command and control. These situations, you have to really spend a little bit more time with high relationship people, clarifying, listening, understanding. Really what we have, Terri, is a system to deliver empathy. So how do you do that? How do you remember to do that? The first is L in the LEAP system. Listen. Don't justify. Don't tell them that your feelings are better than theirs. Don't come up with the answer before they've finished. Just sit and listen. Make eye contact. Open your body language. It's very similar to what we do in a good consult. If you see what a good consult is, eye-to-eye contact, inviting behavior, you're mirroring the pacing and the tone and the gestures, perhaps. You're leaning forward a little bit. So that great consultation skill, by the way, you should use that with your employees right now at this point in time. So that's the listen part. Empathy is demonstrating that you understand how they are feeling. And for me, again, I talk about this being, as a high logic person, a bit of a guessing game. I try to understand how they're feeling and put that in words. A high relationship person would totally get it right away. I also like to use feeling words, and they're very different from logic words, by the way. Logic, the word argument to high logic people is just a debate. The word argument to a high relationship person is, oh, you got in an argument. So listen, empathize, and then acknowledge and ask. It's really the same. You're asking for clarification, And finally, you move on to propose. You don't present. It's sort of the equivalent is how we are moving much more to shared collaborative decision-making in healthcare, in which we propose courses of action to discuss with our patients. You could do this, we could do this, we can do this. These are the options, these are the choices. So we should really incorporate some of the best of the consultation skills into the dialogue we have with our employees every day.
I am going to repeat that back because I eat this shit up. Okay. So we talked about the LEAP system and what does that stand for? And it's very similar to the layer. So I want you guys to get a pen and paper out and I want you to write this down. LEAP layer. We both said we really need to listen. We need to empathize. We need to ask and propose. And or the layer model, which they're really interchangeable, is listen, acknowledge, explore, and respond. And, Dr. Tager just gave this analogy about having children. I mean, if we can use these communication styles, you guys, in our lives, in our everyday lives, we would be so much further along and avoid misunderstandings. I mean, hell, half relationships break up because we don't know how to communicate effectively. So, Mark, before I move on to my next question, I'm curious your thoughts. Do you recommend that practices should give their teams these personality tests to develop or understand who they're working with and what style they are?
So that's really interesting, Terry. I developed an instrument called the Power Source Profile about 25 years ago. It's been translated into multiple languages. It's used all over the world. It's part of a training course. And I actually make that available to folks who want to use it. It's online. It's simple. It's 5 minutes. And what it does is it does several things. One is for an individual, it can help you focus on where you need to concentrate based upon your temperament and type in terms of being a more resilient individual. But for a practice, what it does is it gives you that quick insight in how to communicate with patients or staff. And I think it's a powerful tool because you want your words and your actions to resonate with the recipient. Now, people who are really good at reading others, now I know you're really good at this, so you can often tell from how people come across, I hate to say it, we're both in California, it's vibes, the choices of words, the pacing, the look and the sense. You can tell when you're resonating with a high relationship person. Now, one of the things that I do when I give talks, because audiences are skewed, if you are giving a talk about aesthetics to a group of massage technicians, you would maybe speak one way. If you're doing it to a business of high-tech engineers, you would speak another way. So very often there are personality types that tend to gravitate to certain professions. So you get a clue that way. The other piece of that is that if you don't know, I try all 4 energy types. And now my system, we have grounding versus creative energy, which is preference, how you prefer to get information into your world, and then process it either with logic or relationship. So a grounded focus is very crisp, it's very clean, it's one thing at a time. And in fact, in changing times, you can help grounded people stay really well by saying, Joni, I know we've got a lot going on, but today you've got to get this one thing done. And then a grounding person will say, oh, you are the greatest boss ever. So a highly creative person, I always, by the way, in times of stress and change, take them out walking. I always walk because the act of putting one foot in front of another helps them to stay focused. Because highly creative people in stress and change can get fragmented. They got so much stuff to do. They get overwhelmed by their own creativity. Logic is easy. It's analytical, if A, then B. And logical people, if things make sense to them, they're on board. And then finally, there's relationship people who understand, who really look at the world through the feelings of others, how events and activities will affect others' feelings. So if you can get a handle on that really quickly, you can just shift your dialogue, shift your actions a certain way. The people who are really great at this in the consult have mastered this. I mean, I've sat, and as have you, in lots and lots of consults. And you watch the way a skilled plastic surgeon or dermatologist would take a highly logical individual and lay out a very, very logical plan. For a high relationship person, they would just tweak and move their dialogue to be more feeling centered. They use feeling centered words, share, caring. Okay. For a high creative person, they would go to the possibilities. To a high grounding person, they would just hammer over and over the 3 steps that the patient needs to take. So there's a certain power and mastery that can be accomplished by understanding how people resonate with inputs and how they resonate with ways in which they process information.
Everyone could do better, and work on, which would, again, just improve the lives of everyone. And again, especially right now within our practices, which is what we're really focused on. That leads us to your live webinar next Wednesday, which I am super excited to be a part of and to listen to. And we're going to be focusing on the 5 critical skills that bring out the best in others. And you talked about that. And I'd love for you to share with the tribe, what are those 5 skills?
Well, in the book, we've got 7, so I'm paring it down to 5. And the first is really to understand your leadership behaviors. There's another exercise I often do, Terry, around leadership style. And I ask people to think of a very stressful event that they've gone through in their life, and they've come out the other side. What did they learn about themselves? What did you learn? If the listeners do this right now, think about the biggest change you've gone through, either personally or professionally. What attitudes and behaviors served you well? You're here now, you got through it. And then what attitudes and behaviors got in your way? Now, those same attitudes and behaviors, both on the positive side and the negative side, will come up again. So in a leadership plan, you need to acknowledge and deal with that. It's very close to what I used to do when I was working with patients, and we were working on lifestyle changes, and they would make a plan, and I would ask them to rate their commitment on a scale from 1 to 10. 10 being absolutely, Dr. Tager, I'm committed. This is going to happen. 0, ha, 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 I'm just humoring you. So once you get that number, you ask them, well, why did you rate yourself an 8 or a 7 or a 6? What's going to get in your way? So I think there's that acknowledgement. Another is that as part of that style, there is this concept of wanna and have to. Now, when leaders are under stress, certain traits get magnified. It's nice to want to be in control. It's great to want to be liked. It's wonderful to want to be right. But if you have to, if stress pushes you, then certain behaviors take over. If you want to be in control, fine. If you have to be in control, you'll micromanage. You'll drive everybody crazy. It goes on. So we'll talk a little bit about wanna and have to. We will focus a little bit more on the concept of leap and empathy. I think that's very important. Another one is this concept of context and how we begin to provide context for employees. Part of any change is setting up the big picture around change. And certainly this is challenging now because the context keeps changing. But even within that, there are aspects that you want to hold on to and carry with you, and new possibilities. And then I'll introduce a brainstorming technique that I've been using for several decades that's much better than the traditional brainstorming methodology. Most of the time, at least in corporate America, but I think it's in practices as well, we push people into a room and say, hey, let's brainstorm and come up with new ideas for revenue generation or this or that. And what I've found, and I've asked this question to thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people, where are you when you get your best ideas? The ones that come to you from out of the blue. And I'll never forget, I was doing a big program at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center in Houston. And I had 1,000 people standing up. And I said, okay, if I guess where you get your great ideas, I want you to sit down. So the driving to and from work, commuting to and from work, a quarter of the audience sits down. In the shower in the morning, shaving, doing your hair, doing your makeup, another quarter sit down. Exercising, working out, gardening, walking, another quarter sit down. And finally, right before bedtime or right when you wake up, another quarter of the audience sits down, except for one person. I've got one person still standing and 1,000 people. And I say, well, where are you when you get your great ideas? You know, the ones that kind of come to you from out of the blue. She said, well, I get them at work. And that never happens to people. People don't get good ideas at work. They're working and their brain is full of stuff. They're the list. And so we get our great ideas. So we teach a process. I'll talk more about it, the actual details in the session, about how we create a more brain-friendly way of getting the best ideas. Because the other part of this is that if you think of your practice as a pyramid with the doc, the practice manager at the top, that's really the wrong way to think of it. You've got to flip it upside down so that instead of being responsible, you are responsive. And the people closest to the patient, the closest to the problem, also are closest to the solution.
So, Mark, I want to pivot and ask you your opinion on this, because I work with so many practices, and some of which have a lot of cultural issues, right? I can help with the infrastructure. I can help a practice launch, grow, or scale. But it's very difficult when they have people who just don't want to be on the bus. And so we're talking about these traits and these skills that people can learn in your book, in your webinar. And I really want you guys to take a minute next week and be on this webinar next Wednesday. Mark, I want a copy of your book, but is it possible? I mean, what do you suggest when these practices have issues with?
Yeah, I want to go back. I want to take you back even further. 1984. I wrote a book with Marjorie Blanchard, whose husband Ken is a 1-minute manager. And we looked at exploring the traits that make people bad bosses, and the traits that keep people psychologically fit and appreciative. And one of the real traits, obviously this is at the heart of the 1-minute manager, is that most people do not get enough praise and feedback. Now, I'll tell you a funny story. So I was doing some work with a company, and we did a survey of the employees, and we went to the leader and they said, your people don't think they're getting enough praise and feedback. And he went ahead and he wrote in his calendar that every Monday morning he would go around and praise his people. So Monday comes and he goes around and says, hey, Bob, attaboy. Hey, Joe, great job. Sally, thanks. You're doing great work. And then he didn't seem to get much improvement, much productivity improvement. And the culture surveys didn't come back any better. And when we asked the employees, they thought, we thought he was running for political office. So there is something called the gift of feedback. Feedback is a gift, and it has to be positive. It has to be immediate. It should be more for the recipient than for you. It should ideally, there's surveys, there's one study that sort of said that the right ratio of kind of strokes to pokes is 5-1. So that for every one criticism that you have to level, you should look for 4 to 5 other opportunities to praise people for doing something right. You got to catch people doing something right. Now, if you can't catch them doing it totally right, catch them doing it halfway right. And we see this in the millennials, certainly. There's all of us have a giving and getting compromise for work. We give time and energy in exchange for what? Okay, money, yes. Mm-hmm. But very often it's growth, it's opportunity, it's new skills. And you can't grow high performance people without feedback, particularly young people who've come into the workforce. they demand more feedback. They need more feedback. So feedback is catching people doing something right then and there, letting them know how something made you feel. And if there's just one sort of a Band-Aid for so many of the cuts and scrapes and wounds that people get, it would be the ability of a leader to go ahead and provide more feedback.
I love it. That's perfect. So, Mark, let's just take a minute and let's dive in. Let's tell the tribe, the listeners, let us know more about the webinar next week, when it is, what's the format, more importantly, how can they sign up?
Okay, we'll give you a link to signing up. The point, the webinar is on 22nd. It's at 12 Pacific time. We will do some replays, so you want to sign up anyway. I guess this sort of all came about because I ran across a couple of cases of this book in my garage when I was cleaning it out. I sat down and I read it and said, whoa, leadership in times of stress and change. This information is just as pertinent and vital today. And I thought it would be just a nice sort of gift to the practices that you and I work with. I mean, I work with a lot of groups, and this really is nothing to sell on this. It's no big offer. I do have 2 cases of books in my garage, and we can make those available. But the point is that we need these skills more than ever before. Mm-hmm. People are suffering, and they look to leaders to have answers. We may not have all the answers, but we can help guide and shape people's behavior. So on the 22nd, my colleague, Robert John Hughes, will actually be interviewing me. He's a brilliant interviewer, almost as good as you, Terri. And
I'll take it.
So we'll do that. We'll do that little webinar, and it's for all sorts of people. I mean, most of the folks who follow Robert and me are in healthcare. They're in either integrative, functional, aesthetics, some aspect of cash pay. But I'm also belong to some business groups, and we'll have some other leaders on this session. I just think that anytime you attend any webinar or podcast, if you could come away with one nugget, one skill, something that you could do on a Monday morning, let's say, we always use that phrase, go over the session over the weekend. What am I going to do differently on Monday morning? That's what I hope folks will come away with. So we'll explore this in some greater depth. I'll have some other examples. We'll be able to relate a little bit more to some of the healthcare examples. And of course, all of this underlies the work that Robert and I mainly do, which is helping practitioners enhance their presence, better speaking skills, better video skills, being able to clarify and communicate their messaging more effectively. And that's really the key to distinguishing yourself and continuing to build your brand, even in changing times. In fact, you could make the case that right now, the digital communication platforms, video, audio, are more important now than ever before, because we want to continue to win the hearts and minds of prospects and patients, to let them know that we can help them now and in the future.
Mark, if I could chime in for just a minute, not for the recording, but this is going to live on the podcast, in the podcast for a while. So and there's such amazing evergreen content here. So Terri, a suggestion I have for you is, all right, tribe, for those that are listening past July, was it 22nd?
Yeah.
Dr. Taylor, can you please provide us more information on how Terri's tribe can get in touch with you, or just for those people that happen to listen later?
Exactly. So that's a perfect thing. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Mark, my dear friend, Dr. Tager. You guys, I really want you to know and take away. He said so many invaluable tips of what we can be facing right now. And again, the webinar is on leadership in times of change, stress and change. But more importantly, if you guys are listening and it's after the webinar is done, Mark, how can the tribe, anybody that wants to reach out to you, work with you, get a hold of you, how can we best do that?
Sure. 3 ways. One, email team, T-E-A-M, at changewell.com. 2, Instagram, DRM Tager, Dr. M. Tager, DRM Tager. 3, I love LinkedIn as well. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn. I look at everybody's profile. I respond almost 100% to people who are in the field and are serious and not trying to sell me stuff. I've got some wonderful connections there. So 3 ways, team at changewell.com, Instagram, DRM Tager, and LinkedIn.
Amazing. Okay, Dr. Tager, thank you so very much. I am, again, so honored to have had you on today. I know that I love working with you. I love listening to you. I love learning from you. I hope everybody walked away with some amazing tips, and don't forget to chime in next Wednesday. I'm grateful for all of you, all of your feedback, and for staying in touch and listening. Okay, take care, tribe. Talk soon.
Many thanks to Dr. Mark Tager for joining us here on In Touch with Terri. Again, Dr. Tager will be hosting a very valuable webinar titled Leadership in Times of Change and Stress, 5 Critical Skills to Bring Out the Best in Yourself and Others. That'll be taking place on Wednesday, July 22nd, noon Pacific. But if you happen to be listening to this podcast after July 22nd in the crazy year that is 2020, check out all of the links in the episode notes to get in touch with Dr. Tager. The next set of links you'll find belong to the many ways that you can get in touch with Terri, including a link to Terri Ross's online course titled Practice Foundational Elements, Your Roadmap to a 7-Figure Medical Practice. This video course offers 5 modules and a bunch of bonus features that'll help you build a rock-solid foundation for your business, and with the information that is based off of Terri's 20-plus years of sales experience and her proven methods of scaling a Beverly Hills medical spa, yielding growth of $600,000 in just 1 year. The next set of links is for my company, Inbound Films. We produced all of the marketing videos for Terri when she was managing partner at that Beverly Hills medical spa, and we produce all of the videos for Terri Ross Consulting. I'd love an opportunity to help you achieve the same success Terri has enjoyed with video marketing. One last ask before we let you go, please don't forget to subscribe to In Touch with Terri in whichever podcast platform you're enjoying the show from. That way, you won't miss a single episode. For Terri Ross of Terri Ross Consulting, I'm Tim Cicerelli with Inbound Films and the Inbound Podcasting Network.